determined. Obviously, I'm a very determined person. There's nothing like a mom on a mission, and there's nothing like fathers on a mission and grandparents on a mission. And I really believe of a mission of possibilities and not impossibilities. I have a great autism team. Obviously, because of this, it led me to a new career, and I have a nonprofit, and I speak across the country to parent support groups. I speak to medical schools. I speak to physicians to try to educate them about not just hyperbarics, but about having hope. That at the end of the day, just because they have MD next to their name, or just because they may be like an ABA therapist, maybe telling you that you only have so much potential, or a speech pathologist, or an OT saying, no, your daughter's never going to feed themselves. Really? Because you know, you have the tools to help have my daughter try to learn that. Let me be the one to decide what my child can and cannot do. But this is my autism team for hyperbaric therapy. And as of 2011, over 58,000 hyperbaric treatments have been monitored. And an estimated 1.28 million have been given overall. It is the most studied DAN protocol, and it is the only protocol to be proven effective through a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, which is the gold standard for mainstream medicine, which is really key because at the end of the day, my goal is not just to educate people and parents on hyperbarics and to try it for your children, but it's to get it approved so that you're not having to use your resources on something that insurance should be paying for. And so in order to do that, I have to fund studies in order to get insurance companies and Congress to listen to me. Dr. Newbrander, a well-known physician in the States, says that most of his patients, and he's monitored probably now close to 15,000 hyperbaric treatments, that he sees improvements in language, social skills, gut problems, sensory, and he sees improvement in 8 out of 10 children that he treats with hyperbarics. Dr. Bradstreet, this is here with his son, who benefited greatly from hyperbarics, has treated now probably close to 2,000 ASD children and has seen significant improvements with hyperbaric therapy. Dr. Rosigno, love this man to death, has 2 children affected, is a leading researcher in hyperbaric medicine, has no financial ties to hyperbaric medicine. He's one of those true people that just wants to figure out the science behind hyperbarics. When I first met him, it was at an autism conference. His wife is a nurse. She's like, I want to get this chamber. He's like, are you crazy? He was like mainstream medicine still back then, even though he had 2 children on the spectrum. He's like, it's a chamber compressed with air. Really, Lanier? That's not going to help our kids. And she just kept persisting and persisting, and like most women and wives, they usually end up winning, and she went home with the chamber. So he treated his kids, and then he saw improvements in his own children, and that's when he said, you know what? I need to figure out, he's very geeky science, and he said, I need to figure out why this is happening, so maybe we can target what population of kids hyperbarics would really help, because obviously that's the key. We want to make sure that you're doing a therapy that would help your child, because there's so many different things out there that can help. And he is the leading researcher right now in hyperbaric therapy. Hyperbarics and autism, the science behind the therapy. What medical problems are associated with autism? Well, we know that we have chronic brain inflammation. We have increased oxidative stress already. We have increased incidence of GI problems. We have immune system dysfunctions, mitochondrial dysfunctions. And so what can hyperbarics do, if anything? Now, I like to clarify about the mitochondrial dysfunction because you're hearing more and more about mitochondrial dysfunction in autism. And so a lot of times after people hear my presentation and they're like, oh my God, that lady, you know, her daughter had a mitochondrial disease. Is that what's going to happen to my child? My daughter has a true mitochondrial disease. It was tested through a muscle biopsy. It's the only way that you can tell it's genetic. Mitochondrial dysfunction is something completely different. It's when in the mitochondrial chain summary, you're missing something. And usually that dysfunction can be fixed by implementing different things like CoQ10, thiamine, riboflavin, ascorbic acid, different things like that. So I want to clarify that. So if some of you are sitting in the audience and you're going, oh my God, my child the doctor just mentioned mitochondrial dysfunction. There is a complete distinction between mitochondrial disease and mitochondrial dysfunction. And Dr. Rosno has been doing a lot of the studies right now, even on the mitochondrial dysfunction. What is hyperbaric therapy? It's the use of air under increased pressure with or without increased oxygen concentration. It puts more oxygen into the plasma of the blood. It increases oxygen delivery. It has an anti-inflammatory effect, and it causes changes in the cell enzymes and mitochondrial. In lay people's terms, it's this: by going into a chamber, we are forcing oxygen into the cells on a cellular level. And what we're trying to do is repair parts of the brain that are called the recoverable brain. Now, it doesn't matter how you got your injury. It doesn't matter if you feel that your autism came from vaccines, or if you're on the genetic side. It doesn't matter if you were in a car accident, if you had carbon monoxide poisoning, if you have MS, if you had a stroke. You had an injury to your brain. And there's around that injury, there usually is a part of the brain that just isn't receiving enough oxygen to do what it's supposed to do because of that injury. And so by going into a chamber and forcing the cells into the cells on a cellular level, it gets into your blood plasma, and it crosses that blood-brain barrier, and it starts to repair and to fix those cells, because now oxygen's getting to them, and those cells will continue to pick up and do what they were naturally meant to do before the injury occurred. That's why hyperbaric seems to help with so many different indications, is because we're just trying to repair the part of the brain that we call the recoverable brain. Hyperbarics and autisms and the mechanisms. Well, what we're doing with autism is that we're increasing the perfusion in the brain. We're decreasing the inflammation. Many of you may have heard that your child has inflammation not only in the brain but in the gut, which my daughter has both. You're upregulating antioxidants. You're increasing the function of your mitochondrial, which is really important, because your mitochondria, your energy-producing cells, everybody needs them. You hear a lot about mitochondrial and anti-aging, because as you age, that's what's happening. Your mitochondrial, as you get older, continue to die. So you need to make sure at a younger age that your mitochondrial are all working and that your cells are able to reproduce and so forth. And it's improving your gut function. Hyperbaric decreases inflammation. There's tons of studies out there that have already proven that, have nothing to do with autism, have nothing to do with anything except for people in the mainstream medical world who have studied hyperbaric therapy know that it shows that chronic inflammation in the brains of people diagnosed with autism. There's many studies out there, studies that have demonstrated anti-inflammatory effects in hyperbaric. So it makes sense, if we already know that we have inflammatory with children and adults with autism, that we should, use different things. Anti-inflammatory drugs, a lot of doctors will use. Now people are picking up that hyperbarics can do the same, or inflammation as a response to injury. I went over a lot of this with the hyperbarics, and the effects of hyperbaric oxygen on energy production, and it increases that. And we do want to try to increase as many of our mitochondrial cells as we can, not only for our children that are diagnosed with different types of illnesses, but also just for ourselves in general health and fitness. Hyperbarics in the gut. Clinical studies show hyperbarics improves inflammatory bowel disease. Inflammation in the gut can cause secondary inflammation in the brain. Parents reports improvements of GI function with hyperbaric therapy, which is scientifically proven. Now, Dr. Rosganow's first study was a retrospective case series in hyperbarics and autism. He took 6 children, and these were just children that were in his neighborhood. After he treated his 2 sons, he said, okay, I'm just gonna find some kids in my neighborhood that have autism, and I'm gonna tell their parents I'd like to try to do a little case study. He took 6 children, he put them in a mild hyperbaric chamber at 1.3, used an oxygen concentrator, which got the oxygen concentration 28 to 30%. He did before and after ATEC, CARS, and SRS scores, which is like the scores that the Defeat Autism Now Institute and ARI that they really recommend in doing and so forth. So he did that, and he saw improvement in all the scores, which that little case study there suggested that mild hyperbarics may be beneficial. So that was his first thing that he did. Then his second study, he wanted to make sure that oxidative stress did not increase with hyperbaric therapy, because our kids already have oxidative stress, so why are we increasing oxygen in them if they already have oxidative stress? This time he took 18 children ages 3 to 6 years old with autism. He treated them at 1.3, 24% oxygen, and at 1.5 in a steel chamber at 100% oxygen, and he measured inflammation and oxidative stress markers. And what that study revealed is that after 40 treatments, there was no worsening of oxidative stress, and it improved the CRP, which is the inflammation marker. So the inflammation improved, which means that the inflammation actually went down in these children. And he saw improvements in motivation, speech, and cognition and awareness.